Good morning, a warm welcome to everybody for our last climate talk before summer's break. And today we're going to have an immensely creative topic, sustainable architecture, and what it could mean for our present lives and of course of our future, and be more aware and conscious about our resources. When I checked the Encyclopedia Britannica, it says, in the early 21st century, the building of shelter in all forms consumed more than half of the world's resources, translating into 16% of Earth's freshwater resources, 30 to 40% of all energy supplies, and 50% by weight of all raw materials withdrawn from Earth's surface. Architecture is also responsible for 40 to 50% of waste deposited in landfills, 20 to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. If the numbers are really true or not, it's a hefty thing, I guess. And we are going to explore how to do better from now on, and how we already tried our experts to do better ever since they are in this wonderful sustainable architecture, urban living, and constructing business. I have the pleasure of introducing to you shortly, because I have so much to say, Zsombor Bachta. He is currently in Budapest, and he's responsible for international relations as Senior Parliamentary Advisor at the National Council for Sustainable Development in Hungary. And he's current president of the Hungary Green Building Council. Cut matters short. David, most welcome, David. Thanks a lot for taking the time. David is founding partner at haascookzemmrich Studios 2050 in Stuttgart, but his home is definitely not Germany. He might like to reveal later on. His architecture firm pursues human-friendly, environmentally responsible solutions to urban planning and architectural projects. And David was also, amongst many other activities, co-curator of the highly successful touring exhibition Ecology, Design and Synergy throughout Germany. And last but definitely not least, Ivan, who was lovely enough to tune in from his vacation. Ivan has a very international professional background and academic international background as well, from Germany, China, Spain, Chile, Mexico, and the United States. He graduated, excuse me, at the University of Houston with a bachelor in architecture, and he is very much into environmental design along with construction management, and he is very much also into the digital technologies that help constructing. Before all of you get into your presentations, I have one probably not surprising question. Zsombor, what would be the 5 keywords for you for sustainable urban living?
Well, first of all, it would be like livability. It would be finding the right balance. It would be efficiency. It would be also future-proofing, and it would be also healthy, like healthy living.
David, for you, the 5 principles of sustainable architecture, or 3 if it's only 3, or 7 if it's 7.
1. Strive for simplicity.
Great. And Ivan, what would be the characteristics for sustainable construction?
I would say we utilize technology to make it sustainable. That would be my approach.
Great, wonderful. So we check upon you later if you stick to this and see what your arguments are. Zsombor, we'd like you to start with your presentation. that will give us an overall and of course a very Hungarian, which is important as we IJP Climate Talks, perspective of your ideas about a very human kind of living, sustainable and planning in Hungary. Floor is open to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a quick question. Do you see my presentation also in full screen so everything can see and hear me? Okay, good. So I was asked to give a short summary and brief summary about the Hungarian situation, or it's more like Central Europe. But if we talk about sustainability and the real estate sector in general, we cannot miss the facts, which are, of course, globally or global scale. So first of all, we have to talk a little bit about the urbanism and this urban shift, which is happening throughout the last 100 years. And this is, of course, also a trend which is ongoing. Fact is that more and more globally, people are living in urban areas, and this will be even more, and this is prospected for the future. So that means that the importance of the built environment in general, also for people in general, is becoming significant. We talk a lot about CO2 emissions, how to reduce, how to mitigate, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, again, the global trend is showing a completely different picture, because we talk a lot, but the CO2 emission curve is constantly going up and up. Why we are talking about that? Because as you already mentioned, in the very beginning, the real estate sector or the built environment has a huge impact on sustainability aspects. First of all, one of the biggest impact is on land use. So we talked about urbanism and the urban spread. The second one is a huge impact on materials, so on resources. As you can see, this is from the OECD. This is like a global prospect, how material use in general will change and increase again. I would highlight the graph at the blue graph at the bottom of this presentation. Global change between 2011 and 2060. You see that population is growing by approximately 1.5. However, unfortunately, this growth is much bigger if we are talking about the material use, which is more than 2 times. So population is growing, but the material usage is prospected to grow more and more. I think everybody can see that somehow this is not sustainable. The directions which we are facing, the direction which we are doing currently, is not sustainable. If we are focusing now a little bit from the global aspect to Hungary, but by the way, this could be also representative for many EU countries. However, I took the data from the Hungarian Statistic Office. With the red bottom or with the red line, you see the Hungarian population. You see that this is a decreasing trend. So we are less and less people in Hungary, for example. And with the yellow curve, you see the sealed or the built-in surfaces in Hungary. And this is a trend. So we are less people, but we are using and sealing and more and more surfaces. Of course, natural habitats, green fields, and so on and so forth are then less and less. And this is again a trend which is dramatic, and somehow something has to be done, because otherwise we are facing huge challenges. Again, outlook to a global perspective. I don't know whether you know, but in 2020, the so-called anthropogenic mass was for the first time in the history of our planet bigger than the so-called natural mass. If we would like to see in numbers what that means, that is, for example, if we are looking to the so-called masses, that the animal mass is approximately 4 gigatons. However, the plastic which we produced is about 8 gigatons. This is human-made. And you see also the building and the infrastructure, which is, again, a huger, let's say, mass than the trees and the shrubs are. concrete attributes to over 30% of this trend and to this anthropogenic mass, which is again a huge impact on our planet. It's a huge impact on sustainability. It's a huge impact on the sustainability aspects. And if we take in consideration, and this is from the Nature magazine, by the way, that concrete is a significant player in this anthropogenic mass, then automatically you will also understand that our built environment and the real estate sector is a significant player in this respect. So yeah, this is just a summary about the huge impact on sustainability, the huge impact on sustainable aspects. On the one hand side, of course, if we are talking about sustainability, we shouldn't forget also the economic, the environmental, and the social factors. I mean, now there is not enough time to go deep inside what these sustainability dimension means also in particular for the real estate sector, but we shouldn't forget also about the importance, and this is especially for Hungary, by the way, the importance of the real estate and the construction sector in terms of the country's GDP and economic growth. So on the one hand side, we have, of course, the strong importance of the real estate sector. On the other hand side, we have a huge and immense ecological footprint, which should be somehow balanced, because otherwise the directions are completely wrong. And then we are facing, of course, huge challenges. You mentioned already the 2050 EU climate goals, net zero operation. This is targeted, this is put into the law, this is put into legislation. So we have to be on this pathway, but there are huge challenges, and therefore complex issues, complex solutions would be needed, how to mitigate and how to mitigate these negative impacts. You might heard already about the so-called UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 70 goals globally, which sets the actions, which sets the main targets globally for many sectors, how you could step on a more sustainable way, how we could be more sustainable. And with these development goals and actions, this is a relatively comprehensive, let's say, framework which the UN set it out in 2014 or 15, I think. Now, in this graph, you see that the real estate sector and the construction industry can directly influence 9 out of these 70 SDG goals directly. That means that, again, our impact is on the one hand side huge. If I'm talking about our impact, then I'm talking about the real estate sector and the built environment's impact. On the other hand side, they are also huge chances and mitigation factors which can mitigate indeed, and which can direct also to this more sustainable future, to more environmental friendly future. So that's very important to say, because if we are just talking about the negative aspects of the built environment, that's one thing. On the other hand, you should also, or we should also talk about the positive influences and the aspects of the built environment. You will hear in the next presentation, I'm sure, also about concrete solutions, how architecture can also serve and do something for a more sustainable future. So that's very important, according to my opinion, also to see the chances and the chances how we can change our world and do it more sustainably. Back to Hungary, or back to Central Europe in general, for our region, it's important to mention that to bring the real estate sector to a more sustainable, let's say, design, construction and operation, is that we have, and the market has also successfully adapted the so-called International Green Building Certification Framework. I mean, these green building frameworks are controversially discussed because, of course, just to have a label on your building doesn't doesn't mean that you are also sustainable, or you are ticking the sustainability box and that's it. Absolutely not. But with the international certification systems, you have a systematic framework, at least, which can guide you towards a more sustainable design, construction, and operation. If we look to the different certified buildings here in the region, then BREEAM is from the UK, by the way, so it's a European UK certification methodology, is leading the market. LEED is from the US originally. They are internationally present, and of course these certifications are also relatively common here in Central Europe. DGNB, which is coming originally from Germany, which is the German Green Building Council, is not so popular yet in the Central European area. This is probably because of its complexity, and it's also based partially on the so-called DIN standards, which makes sometimes the adaptation and of the DGNB system a little bit complicated here in the region, but that will change for sure. A completely new approach is the so-called EDGE certification methodology developed by the World Bank together. And of course, there are other benchmarking tools, the so-called WELL building standard, or the GRASP, which is about the ESG. Nowadays, many people are talking about the ESG, so the environmental, social, and governance factors, the importance of that, especially for the financial institution related to the real estate sector. So these tools are play a very important role if it comes to sustainability and the measurement of sustainability in our region. This is a graph which is showing the Central European situation in terms of certified buildings. The number of certification is shown here in this graph. The data is from February from this year. As you can see with dark green, BREEAM is dominating the market, as I already said, also in Hungary, but the same is also in the Czech Republic, Slovakia. So for the Central European market, that could be that is the case. With light blue, you will see the American LEED certified assets, which is, let's say, on the second rank. And with green, you see the DGNB certification. You see that they play a significant role in Austria, because this is a German-speaking country, of course. However, in the rest of the Central European market, under Central European countries, DGNB is not playing a significant role currently. This might change in the future, we will see. I already outlined that the importance of these green building certifications, and then if we look retrospective, and then now also here in the Budapest office market, you can see significant growth of certification and the certified office spaces. I would just to highlight that, because this is important, by the way, especially because these certification systems are not legally required. They are also no further incentives in Central Europe, or at least here in Hungary, which are connected to a certification. So, but the private market player took up these international standards and the importance of the certifications, basically also because they have also a stakeholder pressure from the tenant side, from the investment side, and therefore they are doing more and more, and there is a significant growth of certified assets here in the Budapest region or in Central Europe in general, which you can see also on this graph. As a last thing, and then I'm ending also my presentation, I would just like to highlight the importance and the changes which are also coming to the real estate sector, and especially to the real estate and the financing sector here in Europe, and especially also of course Hungary, but this applies for the European Union in general. The EU Taxonomy is a very important regulation, which was a regulatory framework which was introduced by the EU last year. It was also developed for the real estate sector. Significant money and financing is connected to sustainability, and if the EU taxonomy regulations and requirements can be fulfilled by the real estate sector, by projects, by buildings for existing and new ones, then you can have a much better financing and financial conditions if you're ticking the EU taxonomy boxes. And this is completely new, and this is also changing dramatically also the financial sector. And of course, money talks in many cases, so therefore this will have a huge impact on the real estate sector in general. It was quick, I know, but we would like to hear also the other presentations because they will give also some more insights. So thank you very much for your time. And if you have, of course, any further questions, then I'm more than happy also after this presentation to answer you. You'll see my email address and contact details. So thank you very much again.
Well, thank you very much, John. Well, I have just one question which requires a short answer, please. How is the awareness of all these sustainability goals, and not only in Hungary, but in Central Europe in general? Is it for all those who are well educated and who know about it, or do more and more people have a certain attitude towards that?
I would say it's the first, so more the, let's say, educated and well read people who are aware about this fact, especially sustainability and the connection to real estate sector. However, the big challenge is also for all of us to educate more and more people and to spread the word about sustainability, the importance of sustainability, especially the connection with the built environment.
Mm-hmm. One question, and you just say yes or no. Will the current crisis influence the future?
Yes.
Yes. Can you elaborate on the? Daiva is asking. Can you elaborate on the finance part, please? Do green offices have easier access to loans, or did you mean subsidies?
Both. So yeah, this is the future. They can have easier access to better loans also. That's the first part. This is, by the way, an EU regulation, and how it is implemented on the national level. This is a typical EU thing. That's another question. So here in Hungary, you can have better loans with better conditions if you are ticking the EU taxonomy boxes. Yes.
Thank you. So now the floor is open to David. David, so you are constructing a better world, a more sustainable living environment. We are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, I'll try and go quickly. I'm not going to get us.
It's all fine.
Okay. We set up our office about 10 years ago with one clear goal, and that goal is basically encapsulated within our name, and that is Studio 2050. We believe in a CO2 neutral society. We believe that we can make a contribution towards that, but only as part of a studio. We are incapable as architects of making major inroads here, even though we are dealing with, as Sabo pointed out, the construction part of the construction industry, which is a major contributor towards global warming. So 2050 is a goal for us to help achieve a climate or a CO2 neutral society. But that goal is not easily achieved, and I will get into a little bit of that. The issue, I think everyone knows it. We can all make projections, but I think the ambitions in reaching CO2 neutral society by 2050 are laudable, but unless everybody gets on board, we are not going to make it. Let's be realistic here. Does it demand a return to a more natural way of living? We don't know, but I would guess yes. The question is, how far back do we go? We cannot, of course, ignore the should we say, steps forward made by innovation or made by integrating innovation or technology into the built environment. But there is much to be learned about the architecture or from the architecture of the past. Yeah. We should be careful when we're talking about efficiency. because efficiency and effect are two very, very different things. For too long, we've been striving for efficiency in architecture, efficiency in all of our technical products, which we're using at home. But in it, really, it's the effect, the effectiveness, which is much more important. This locomotive is probably 50, 60 years old, and in terms of its performance, it is actually probably not too good in terms of its CO2 output. But when you think of the amount of people who are using this means of transport on a day-to-day basis, then it is highly, highly effective. Yeah. When we're talking about the built environment, or when we're talking about architecture, we should really be talking about the existing built environment and not a new built environment. We should consider the city, especially in Western Europe, as a resource, an as yet untapped resource. We should be looking to reuse wherever possible, to recycle and to redefine our cities. This is an example of a project here in Stuttgart, a competition entry about 3 years ago.
Could you just shortly elaborate on like reuse, redefine, what that could mean?
We all know about the embodied energy in our cities, the amount of concrete, the amount of brick, the amount of windows. Yeah. In striving for energy efficiency, it's all too easy to throw this stuff away, to divert to landfills. Doing that automatically consumes vast amounts of energy, as well as polluting the natural environment. Why can we not reuse these materials, stockpile them in our cities rather than transporting them out to the peripheries of our cities? Reuse them at the location. Yeah, this would automatically lead to an, should we say, an evolving architectural aesthetic, and not an architectural aesthetic which is defined by the, should we say, the contemporary magazines, which we are all should we, overloaded with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. What is our response as architects? Well, there are certain things that we can impact upon quickly, but there are other issues which need to be addressed beyond, which are normally beyond the realm of the architect. Yeah. And they are to do with a sharing society. Yeah. So we also need shifts in society in order, or the structure of society and the aims of society in order to achieve our CO2 goals by 2050. These issues are much more difficult to address. And as I say, they cannot be addressed by an architect. Yeah.
Who should then address this?
I'll come back to that later. Okay. What are we after in terms of a built environment? Well, of course, everyone wants the bespoke, but everyone should accept that that can lead to vast consumption of materials and a throwaway society if we're not careful. Therefore, we have to find a balance between the bespoke and the robust. Yeah. Of course, we're seeing shifts in global society. Yeah. From the singular to the society, or to a cooperative society. Yeah. And we're seeing how this is we can see how this is reflected in our architecture. Yeah. In 2002, when we were part of an office, Danish architect here in Germany, then we developed the Norddeutsche Landesbank in Hanover. This was an architecture which responded to the demands of concentration, yeah, concentrated workplace. Just 9 years later, we developed the Unilever headquarters in Hamburg. This is an architecture which is about communication. Yeah, a degree of openness encourages communication amongst the workforce. And the latest building from ourselves, please come now, is the Promega headquarters in Mannheim, just outside Mannheim here in central Germany. And this is an architecture which talks about regeneration. You see, the architectural expression and the quality of space is automatically responding to these shifts in global concerns. Yeah. But it's far more simple, it's far more complex than that. Yeah. We cannot consider a building separate from its immediate environment. Therefore, it's incredibly important that we discuss the urban landscape, or should we say the rural landscape, and look at how architecture or buildings work hand in hand with their immediate surroundings. Architecture also works hand in hand with the people who are occupying these buildings. Yeah, it's essential that we consider nature as our ally and not as our enemy. And architecture has to respond carefully to the natural environment and not ignore the natural environment. In ignoring the natural environment, we automatically consume vast amounts of materials, and we automatically consume vast amounts of energy in the operation of buildings subsequent to their erection.
Let me just pop in for a question. Sometimes you have like those mega cities where a natural environment already seems to be gone. So what could we do then?
How do you tap into that built environment? How do you mitigate the problems within that environment? Yeah, that built environment, the mega city. Yeah.
Okay.
Massive challenges. I don't have any singular solutions. Each building has to be taken on its own term, in terms of its own problems. Yeah, in terms of its relationships to its surroundings, in terms of its occupancy or occupant problems. Who owns the building? Who lives in the buildings? What's the relationship between the owners and the occupiers? This is getting complicated already. When we say we're striving to, or want to strive towards a circular economy, it sounds good, but please try and do it in terms of the built environment. It gets very complicated indeed. It's easy to source materials, but it's very difficult to find out all of the information about the production and transportation of materials to site. Yeah, it's increasingly difficult to control which materials are actually used on site. Much is dependent upon the type of building project. If it's a public building project, it's much more difficult to be very specific in the specification of particular products. Yeah, we find legislation is actually restrictive at present in terms of generating a true circular economy. Okay, when I talk about circular economy, our ultimate aim is, of course, to reuse as much as possible, to reduce dependence upon landfills, to reduce the extraction of raw materials. We all know that population globally continues to grow. It may be receding in Germany or in Hungary, but globally it continues to grow. And Sabo pointed out our problem. We are continuing to use more and more materials per capita, per head capita. One problem that we are already addressing, thank God, is that in the past, we only consider operational energy demands in terms of the individual buildings. We are now getting our head around the fact that we need to address CO2 balance in terms of operation, or in terms of construction, operation, and also the eventual demolition and reuse. This is complicated, and we are only now finding the tools, or finding the tools, not necessarily using them, and not necessarily using them correctly. We're finding the tools in order to assess the impact of design decisions on the CO2 balance of a building. When we're talking about a built environment, a part of the city, it's getting even more complicated. I think what I'm getting at is we all know where we want to go by 2050, but to get there is incredibly complicated, yeah? Especially when we're talking about the built environment. There are people who are making major steps forward. Our colleague Florian Nagler at the Technical University of Munich, for example, has been allowed to build 3 almost identical buildings, residential buildings, multi-family houses, about an hour south of Munich in the small town of Bad Aibling. And then he has looked at the CO2 footprint of these 3 buildings when using different construction techniques, yeah? And they are then monitoring those buildings in use. Now, this sounds so simple, but it is just not done very often, yeah? It's easy to apply or to throw figures into these types of presentations, but it's very difficult to have a direct comparison between particular building typologies, yeah? Don't forget, I can talk about 3 buildings, 3 same size buildings, same number of occupants, but the occupants have their own different ways of living with these buildings, which means that people open the windows at different times of the day, depending upon their own mood, yeah, upon their own requirements, yeah. Some of this is controlled, some of it is uncontrolled. It all leads to different energy demands in operation, or energy consumption in operation. It is therefore essential that when we are looking at issues of comparison, that we take into account that we as occupants operate on a day-to-day basis very differently to one another. Our particular approach is a striving for simplicity, yeah, to apply technology carefully, and when, then it has to be applied as an additional element and not embedded into the architecture, because we all know that as soon as we buy the new iPhone, then the next iPhone is already not just in production, it's already lined up on the shelves ready to be sold to us. That is typical of all technological products which are used in the construction industry. If we use them, we should use them to our advantage, but we should accept the fact that they are easily outdated, and therefore our architecture should respond to that. It should be easy to take them out and to replace them when necessary. But the general building form should remain robust and should remain there and should not be replaced on a daily basis, which is what we tend to do when we, without being derogatory towards some of the, should we say, IKEAs of the world, we are encouraged to change our furniture on a daily basis. We should not be encouraged to change our houses on a daily basis. That's what I'm getting to. It leads to an evolving aesthetic. It will lead to a new aesthetic, but it's an evolving aesthetic. Evolution is a slow evolution because rules and regulations are restricting us from building simply at the moment. We are encouraged by the lobbyists to use high degrees of insulation. Yeah, we don't need half of this insulation. It has a huge CO2 footprint in its production. It doesn't lead to a massive energy reduction in terms of operation. Yeah. So in our particular architecture, we're looking for the use of simple materials which have can be simply extracted, simply combined into the built form, used for long periods of time, and then, if ever, returned to landfill, hopefully reused. In the architectural process, this is complicated to take all of these issues into account. Building a building is complicated enough, yeah? But to take all of these aspects into account in the design process is very, very time consuming. There are products on the market, such as the Carla product, yeah, that's this thing here, where we can talk about or put into the computer quickly the different building products which are, or the different materials which could be used to build a building. But the problem is this cannot be done at the moment real time. You cannot get quick, should we say, results of the impact of your design decisions in order to show to the rest of the design team the way forward. Most of the time, this is done retrospectively. That is not the correct way of working if we want to produce a CO2 efficient society or built environment. There are buildings which make great strides forward. This is our Alnatura headquarters here in central Germany. It's on the outskirts of Darmstadt. This is one of the largest rammed earth constructions in Central Europe. It's a rammed earth construction with a difference. It is thermally activated, which means that inside the on the inside skin of the building, we are having heating and cooling pipes embedded into the rammed earth construction. It allows for the walls to be more responsive and to reduce the amount of technology within the building itself to an absolute minimum. We, of course, as architects can't do this on our own. We're working hand in hand with companies such as Transolar, with whom we've been working for decades. Yeah, the building form is simple. It's nothing other than a simple large shed. Yeah, quick. Yeah, so we're looking to reduce the amount of building envelope to a minimum in order to reduce heat losses through that. We're then looking to flood the center of the building with natural light. We're looking for natural ventilation. We're looking to use natural materials. We're looking to reduce transportation issues by producing the rammed earth wall elements on site. But our role as architects is to create places which are cherished. These places should be used day in, day out. It's no good as producing the most energy efficient or resource efficient building in the world if it's not used and used extensively. Yeah, the building has to be effective. Yeah, not efficient, it has to be effective. And what we're about is looking at a constant process of re-evaluation and a commitment towards the goals of 2050. This means that with every project, we're striving to make a difference, but everyone has to appreciate that the construction of every project is radically different. Yeah. The clients are different, the financing's different, the design team capabilities are different, the time periods available to the design team are radically different. Yeah, that is why 2050 or a CO2 neutral society for the construction industry is a very complex issue indeed. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. There was lots of food for thought, David. Thanks a lot. I really need some time to digest all your angles, because it always sounds, as you said, so simple to say, oh yeah, circular economy and more natural building practices, and here we go. It's not as easy as that. You were also talking about technology, and Ivan is associate head of tech and innovation at your bureau as well. So Ivan, I heard some kind of, I wouldn't say criticism, but critical view on using technology on construction, on architecture. Do you agree with your boss?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in general, it's been like in the last couple of years, it's been like the technology somehow disconnected from all the core elements of what is sustainability, which is like, it goes completely in the opposite direction of nature, for example. But I think, and that's what my presentation is all about, is how do we bring some of the technological advances that they're already there into our architectural processes to make better decisions, and not to take this, as David was saying, this retrospective analysis. So it's taking the decisions during the process instead of going the other way around. So that's what my presentation is going to be about.
So the floor is open to you, and you have got like a good deal of 10 minutes, but not more, please.
Perfect. I think it's going to be quite easy, because some of the things that I wanted to talk about today have already been approached by previous speakers. As I said before, it's going to be about how to...
Ivan, your line is a little bit tricky. Could you switch off your personal video so we have just a presentation and your audio? I think that would help.
Personal, which one should I turn on?
Close the video.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's going to be about technology. So putting the technology at the office I work for, which is in its core, taking sustainability into one of the main driving design factors. So we have already spoken a little bit about the sustainability goals, development goals by the UN. These are the 17 that were developed in, or it was adopted by its UN members in 2015, drafted in 2014. And I think in 2019, these goals, which were ending poverty, reducing inequality, and of course, tackling the climate change, resonated a little bit more because of the pandemic that we had, or that we're still living in. And so I think we are right now in a really good standpoint, 2022, where we are exactly in the middle of the time frame that the UN gave for these sustainability goals, sustainable development goals. So I think it's important that we as architects, or we as an industry, as a construction industry, we start to see where we can help, or where we can aid even more to make these goals even more, let's say, approachable. So I will start first with the first one that I see that technology can jump into, and of course, is the industry innovation and infrastructure. And so the first question I ask myself is, where should we invest our time for innovation? This is a project by Snoveta, an office that I have a lot of respect to. I think the architecture it's quite nice. It's not a critique to the architecture, but we should start to think that, like, if these forms are really necessary to, or if the technology that we're using as architects, is it necessary, or is it just a nice to have? So in this form that we see here, the computational design to produce these kind of shapes, it's outstanding. Nevertheless, is it sustainable? Is it where we should, as architects, be investing our time and our effort towards sustainability? Well, that's definitely a question that we should be asking ourselves. Nevertheless, we have here on the screen the Munich Olympic Stadium developed by Danish architects and Freiotto in 1972, which is in its core taking a minimal surface toward the whole design of this architecture. So, which means the whole approach by Freiotto was saying, how can we use a roof to cover as much surface as possible with as little material as possible? So this in 1972, which would be for me the end goal of what we should be striking for as architects towards sustainability. So how can the AC industry really innovate? So AC is a term, architecture, engineering, construction. So this is how normally a construction process goes on. So it's designed, it's then later taken into the permitting, then constructed, and then it's operated. So I started my career right out of university in a construction. It was a design build firm where I had the opportunity of seeing the whole process, and without having it disconnected, where we just say as architects, okay, we design, we make it get it permitted, but we never reach the, well, where depending of the contract, but most of the times we don't reach the construction phases or the operational phases. And I think this is critical for the sustainability discussion that we have today, because I think when you divide these 4 stages of the construction process, you will not be able to achieve a truly sustainable approach. So Number 11, we have sustainable citizen communities. So how do we produce more sustainable buildings? We have already discussed that, like in the, how do we produce more, let's say, almond tours? And I think this is a critical question that ties directly to the technology. We can take as an example, the Teslas. The Teslas were technology that was in the beginning seen nearly impossible to get because they were so expensive. As the technology developed, they started getting cheaper and cheaper, and this is just because of how we produce how we produce it. So this applies the same for
Ivan, I'm sorry, your connection is terribly bad. Could you just speed up a little bit, because we also have lots of questions flowing in. So could you just reveal on how artificial intelligence and technology is useful and necessary for sustainable architecture?
Excuse me, Martina, can you repeat the question? Excuse me.
Yes, I'd say your line is so bad, so we'd really like you to speed up a bit and come to the point of saying, why is technology and artificial intelligence so important for sustainable architecture? And we have so many questions coming in, so it is really important that we have time for discussion.
Absolutely. I'll try to maybe speed up, and if the connection keeps getting bad, then yeah, then you can just let me know. And as I said, the way that we can produce these sustainable designs will for sure make the architecture more affordable. So how do we make use of the community data? The same way as we see in some of the sports, the heat maps that are being used, where the players are concentrated in a football camp. We can think the same as we can think about it in the same way for buildings. We can use heat maps to or sensors in the building to say where people are concentrating more, so that the mechanical systems can be optimized in those places and not everywhere in the building. Responsible consumption and production. So it's responsibly designed. I think the computational design powers, it's giving us the opportunity of taking these structures and making them more efficient in terms of how much material we're using in order to optimize performance. And this one was already covered by David, the carbon estimation calculator. I think there's a lot of going into this one, which is how do we take a building and take decisions through the design process. And so we're using internally Kala to help us take these decisions. And
okay, Ivan, your line is getting worse and worse. I have to say, either you stop your presentation and just give us a quick roundup, please, because it's very hard to listen to you. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think this is the last one. So actually, let me finish it here. So maybe I stop sharing and let's see if that works.
Great.
Please excuse me about the connection. So I think to wrap up the presentation, I think the last one was 3D printing. And I believe this is the best approach of how we can use technology to, as architects, to approach better and sustainable, or a more sustainable architecture. And this is just because the amount of waste that goes into the production of buildings is immense. And I think with 3D printing, it would be a good solution to tackle this one. And actually, as the development of the technology, 3D printing, the more materials will be coming into the 3D printer. So I think this is definitely one thing that I see as the most viable solution towards sustainable architecture from a technological approach.
Well, that's sounds great. Hope we learn more on that whenever we open newspapers, radios, whatever. Thanks a lot. Sorry that we had to cut you short due to your bad connection. Elizabeth is asking, and I think it's a very important question. I'd like to refer to David, I think. You have read surely the question, sustainable deconstruction. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, David? And especially is reusing material on the spot when deconstructing buildings a solution to be more sustainable?
I think if you can hear me, I think each and every building has to be considered as a stepping stone in the life cycle of building components or indeed materials. Yeah, it's a temporary store. Yeah. The question is, what is in each and every building? Yeah. And how can you make, should we say, future users of those components, of those materials? How can you make those people aware of the potential of those materials? Yeah. I would encourage anyone who's looking at this issue to look at the Madasta website. Yeah, it's a way of documenting the buildup of each and every building. Yeah, it puts value ultimately on the materials which are in our buildings, and hopefully will reduce the risk of those materials being transferred to landfill sites at the end of the, should we say, the first use of a particular building. Yeah.
But is it also possible, I mean, if the material is relatively, to a person who is not very much into it, okay, and to reuse it, is there a development of like deconstruction, but on the same site and same moment, reuse it for a different shape or for covering or for gardens or terraces, whatever?
I think that's everyone's ultimate aim. I think that should be our ultimate aim. I mean, if you can reuse it at the same, or the approximately the same location, you can also reduce problems associated with transportation. It's just, that's an ideal
of course
situation where you could reuse a material at the same location. But what we're seeing right now are companies or startups such as co-curator here in Germany, who are creating websites where they are documenting where materials or where components are becoming available, and then selling them online to, should we say, you or I or construction company. One of the problems, of course, associated with reuse is the warranties. Yeah, and that's where we have to be very careful. Yeah. There is at the moment, and that's the same as when you go to a secondhand clothes shop, there is an inherent reluctance within our society to use or to reuse secondhand materials, secondhand clothes. I can remember I'm old enough, I can remember in the early 70s that there was, at the time of the energy crisis, there was a definite movement towards sharing. A sharing society was almost present. It disappeared.
I'm same age, so I remember. Yes, yeah.
I think it's on its way back, but I'm speaking for myself. In other parts of the world, the sharing society is definitely still there. The reuse society is definitely still there. I just think it's our privileged position to be able, or we are in a privileged position, and we should be encouraging people to go down the route of reuse, yeah, instead of encouraging everyone to through our should we say consumer-driven society to follow our footsteps. We've made the mistakes, and that's what we need to get across to other societies. Yeah,
is technology available and thinking and creativity available in your sector in architecture to think in boxes like this?
Definitely look to Madasta, look to Carla, look to co-curator. Yeah, these are should we say, Central European platforms that are emerging. Yeah. And we find many of our colleagues, architectural colleagues, or should we say, colleagues in the Immobilien branch, yeah, they are now really waking up to the potential of these platforms. Yeah. Madasta is beautifully marketed. Take a look.
I think this is a wonderful finish. I'm sorry that not everyone got the same amount of time to speak. I have seen John Barr, thanks a lot for adding useful links and everything. There was one question coming from one journalist. If, as we do recording, is it okay to quote you, or would you like to be contacted in terms of being quoted? Question goes to David and to Rambor.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. But of course, we had just a limited time. So if they are elaborated questions, then I think all of us is more than happy to answer that then specifically.
Great. I think this was unanimous. On all, you will have a written summary with all the contacts again on it. It will be uploaded next week on our website as well as the video. Thank you so much for all this load of food for thought. I'm especially grateful that we had this great topic to finish our climate talk season 1 in 2022 before summer's break, and with all your expertise and taking the time, being on vacation, having the Central European aspect, and David with an overview on it. Thanks a lot to our participants, and I wish you, those who participated, who took the time to tune in today, a great summer. Again, stay healthy, and we are very much looking forward to all these sustainable ideas. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.